Here's a picture of Cleopatra, or actually it's a picture of the bust of Cleopatra. It's found in the Berlin Museum, but it's a sculpture created around the time of her visits actually to Rome in between 44 and 46 BC. There are a lot of different depictions and so on. People nowadays know that a lot of these statues were painted back in the day. Although I still like the romantic idea that they're all just marble turned to stone, somehow like Medusa had looked upon them. But on a lot of these, they found little chips of paint and so on, and have realized that they were painted. And so they have a lot of different depictions. And this is one that said that they had a burnt umber or an auburn type of hair given to her in this headdress. Not much else is shown, but I wonder if they look closely at the eyes, if they could get eye color and so on. What we're actually looking at here is a depiction taken from this, directly turned into a photo of realism by a CGI Photoshop artist known as Photoshop Surgeon. In the process of looking up Cleopatra to perhaps do a different video on her recently, I found a few different depictions of her. Some are done off the coins that they show of her, where she's shown a little bit more of a hooked nose than this depiction that's here. But apparently it's not that she may or may not have even just posed for this in some way, but it would have been agreed upon that this would have been somewhat of her appearance. Now, what this girl has done in Photoshop Surgeon is taken eyes, cheek color, the nose, the lips off of people that she has in her library of thousands of pictures probably, and also to show it at the same angle, because if you put it where it's not at the same angle, i.e. this one's just a little to the left, it's gonna look totally wrong. I mean, put her mouth a little to the right and it looks like her face is twisted. You follow me, right? But what she did was she pieced it all together here, and we're gonna show the end product, not the whole thing. It's only 4 minutes and 21 seconds, but half of it's been done with showing you how she made it. And I don't want to necessarily show you that. If you want to, go to Photoshop Surgeon and look at it. And it's pretty neat how they do it, and they make sure they size the eyes exactly around the eyelids that are there and so on, and bam. And so choices were made on this, and I think she's done a very good job. So let's take a look at what her creation is, coming from this statue, and make the statue come back to life as if there was a magic power that you could use to do such a thing, or in reverse of the idea of a Medusa turning someone into stone. So I think that's a pretty good job. And even when she's doing the actual effects, she goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, making sure that they match, that they're sized right and all these things, and it looks pretty well. The one on the side is just so lifelike, but I see one problem with it. To me, right whenever she did the eyes at the first, it seemed like she left the pupil and iris of the eyes just being too big still. And almost looks like some type of anime version of her, if you will. I don't think anybody has irises that are that large. She left them at green. And somebody down in the comments said, being a Macedonian Greek, green eyes could easily be popular. There's a lot of tellings of that too. And that Alexander the Great had one blue eye and one brown eye and a heterochromia. And that's one thing that they looked at, and they said he was half divine because of that. One would have to wonder if that half divine had something to do with blue. Seriously, there's a good chance her eyes were blue just as well as that. as what the Greeks were at the time. But if you know, she's an Egyptian queen at this time after the Ptolemaic dynasty started over, which is what was heralded by Alexander the Great. Give you a little insight here. You know Jennifer Aniston? She's straight up Greek. Sure, she lives in America and everything now, but yeah. And she changed her name. Her name was something like Anna Panopoulos or something like that. And they just westernized it a little bit, took a little of that off of it. Just like the guy that used to play in Full House, and I don't want to try to say his name right now, not certain of it, but he's also a Greek. And you can see that Jennifer Aniston in her just a little bit. And so it would have been something like this. Would she have had a real good tan? Well, if she was out in the open a lot and things like that, perhaps. But during this time, especially, and really all up into modern times, the women have been known to try to keep themselves pale and powder their nose or use powder and things. And then back in Elizabethan times, they were going crazy with calcite, basically chalk. Men and women, wigs and so on to look like that. But here we have a depiction of her which is real lifelike. What this one doesn't have is that program that some of the others have, where now they pinpoint where the eyes, nose, and mouth are and so on, and coordinates, and then they tell it to animate, and it basically just animates and looks around and smiles a little bit and goes back to normal and looks around and smiles a little bit and so on. So pretty cool. But this one doesn't have that effect necessarily, but it does show you the connection and the blend like we just looked at before. And we look at again here in different depictions of the way that it looks. Because this is somewhat what you'd think of as Cleopatra looking like. And now, if you wanted to Egyptianize her, you'd have to do this eyeliner type effect, which was probably a whole lot thicker back in the day. And she gives her the blue eyeshadow of Egyptian blue and so on here. And so after blending it in and everything, yeah, that's the way that would look. Red ochre lips, a little bit of blush, and so on. From this to that. And slowly. Again, I think she's done a fantastic job here with it and the idea of what she might have looked at. Some people have made weird comments here recently about how, well, if she was in Egypt for a while, like if somehow they just did a generation or two being in the different place, that all of a sudden she would have looked different. Well, that's not in effect. You can wiki Cleopatra and actually see her lineage and everything that they know about her. It's well known in history. So there's not some ambiguity that people try to portray on it here, and they have enough depictions of her to choke a horse with. But in a lot of the depictions, she's shown with an auburn type hair, reddish hair, rather than being like black or dark hair. But then again, they show her in that, and she's an Egyptian wig mimicking Isis, which that's well known too. And of course, if you just wiki hair, you go down to curly, it shows you that there was this lady that was a blonde hair that had hair like Farrah Fawcett tucked up under a black wig whenever they found it. And it contains her scalp and everything. And no, natron and all that stuff doesn't change hair type or hair color in any way. And if you look into the ancient Egyptians, it makes you wonder why they're trying to act ambiguous whenever it's been well known for a long time. But that's probably for other videos here. But this is a real good depiction of her. And like as she fades it back in, you can see it. Kind of reminds me of my middle daughter. And of course, this is a little bit of a youngling type thing, and I don't know if it's just the irises of the eyes being too big, comparative wise, just a little. It doesn't take much. But she looks more like a teen coming into her early 20s, perhaps, and surely not the Cleopatra at the very end, or actually at the time that she's supposed to be depicted on the sculpture that's there, and the age that she would have been. To me, this looks a little bit younger, like you need to take 5 or 10 off of her. Here she is. When she was still a queen, when that happened. But people know the lineages that came through there and what happened. So it's really odd in a modern day, you'll hear something where they try to act ambiguous and they insert a Bantu type of person with high admix and her phenotype being quite changed from that, from looking like even a Bantu would have looked like, or still do if you go off in the thick of the non-colonized parts where they are. And it makes you wonder, well, they didn't even know Egypt existed, so why are they trying to insert that? I mean, if they wanted to try to be accurate, they would have probably gotten a Nilotic, like a Nubian, or one of these type of people. Of course, we know Nubians didn't have anything to do with it, and there was a lot of detestment between them. I don't need to go into it. I've got other videos on it, which were just basically put out to prove the fact that, oh no, that's not the narrative at all. What are you trying to say? Look at all these documents here. And I only handpicked a few, enough to say, no, your narrative is wrong. What you're trying to say is wrong, and so on. Anyhow, what do you think about this depiction over here? Let me know down in the comments. I don't know if you'll agree with me necessarily onto it, but I think the big eyes makes it like she's 17 almost, or something like that, rather than a mid-30s to late 30s Cleopatra and so on that we actually had at the very end of it here, because there's quite a bit of variation between what that would have looked like too. Let me know what you think down below. Peace.